You're listening to the #1 podcast for nonprofit leaders, getting your nonprofit fully funded. This is the Fundraising Masterminds Podcast.
The life expectancy of a development person is 18 months. Wow. The expectations on that person are so high. It typically takes 2 to 2.5 years to get a major donor program off the ground. What do those two have in common? Just before the program takes off, what happens? The executive director fires the development director. Wow. It's really important. Get funding coming in the door as quickly as possible.
Well, hey there. Welcome to another episode at the Fundraising Masterminds Podcast. We are so excited that you have chosen to watch or listen to us this week. I'm your host, Jason Galasinski, and with me, my co-host, Jim Dempsey.
Hi, Jason.
Together, we have over 60 years of development experience working with thousands of nonprofits all around the country. And we created this podcast episode to help you as a nonprofit leader, as you are working to start a nonprofit, grow your nonprofit, or take your nonprofit to the next level. We hope that Fundraising Masterminds can be a part of your journey. Today's topic is called hiring a development director.
Right.
What happens next?
Yes.
And I guess as we were discussing this beforehand, so I'm thinking more of like a ministry that just got started, maybe a couple of years old, the executive director or the main person, right? Centered around a main person,
right? Who
really spearheaded the process, got it going. Everyone knows who that main person is.
Yep.
So a lot of the partnerships and the donor relations are focused around this one person.
Right.
But now this one person really wants to grow the organization, but feels very limited in how. So you might be listening, that person might be listening to this podcast, and they might be hearing a lot of the development advice that we're giving.
Right.
And they're thinking, gee, I really want to do that, but I'm spending all my days counseling, or I'm spending all my time working with women, or I'm spending all my time doing this or that. So how can I possibly do all this development effort? Oh, I know. I'll hire a development director.
Right.
Sounds like a great idea, right?
Yeah, it actually does sound like a great idea. Unfortunately, what tends to happen is that after a time, the executive director hires a development director and says, I'm done. I no longer have to do development. I'm turning it over to this person. That's why I brought you on, is to do that.
And that's what I hired the development director for.
Yeah, exactly. Well, nothing could be further from the truth, because the executive director always needs to stay connected, and in so many ways almost has to continue to be the chief development officer. But what has to happen is there has to be a partnership. There has to be a cooperative effort. There's a handful of things that we can do to help the executive director transfer those relationships over to the new development director and allow that development director to flourish.
Maybe we should go back to just before we hire the development director. Maybe we should understand, well, what is the differences between the roles of an executive director and a development director? Because maybe I'm thinking about the development director wrong. Maybe you could explain to me just why would someone hire a development director and what would their roles and responsibilities be? Yeah,
well, that's a great question, because I think I'll probably start out with what I just said in a sense, in that and the wrong thing for the executive director to believe would be that they are no longer involved in the development efforts. So typically, if everything is revolving around the founder or the founding executive director, the relationships are, as you said, are really strong with that individual, but it needs to get transferred over to the director of development. But the executive director is always going to be that point person for the relationships with our major donors. Now, what ends up happening with a good executive director is that if you've got a development director, that development director needs to be responsible for setting up the connections with the executive director. Because in most cases, business people of means generally want to deal with the decision maker of the organization to give that ultimate money. We've talked about over the years, Bill Bright, how for years we'd always set it up for Bill Bright to hit the ball out of the ballpark.
Yeah.
And so, but there needs to be a lot of setup people. And that is one of the primary jobs of the development person.
Yeah.
Now, that doesn't mean that the development person doesn't spend a lot of time setting up and developing relations with people because they need to. And is there a time that the development director should be asking for money? Absolutely. But there's also a time when the executive director is the only person who's going to close on that deal, close on that relationship with that major donor.
So it's really, what I'm hearing you say is it's more of a partnership. You're not hiring a development director to replace a certain role that you used to do and no longer want to do it.
That's right.
Because the way I was thinking about it originally was like, well, I'm a Billy Graham and I want to go out and just do Billy Graham crusades. I don't want to have to deal with developing relationships with people and raising money. So I'm going to just offload that responsibility. It sounds really good on paper to say that, like, well, that makes perfect sense. Billy Graham should be out preaching and evangelizing and hire someone else to do all the fundraising and appeals and letter writing and all that stuff. And just what does Billy Graham need to get involved with that for? It sounds really good. But what you're saying is, even Billy Graham probably did development.
Oh, without question, Billy Graham did development. And I know that he did. Now, what we need to remember is what are the role and responsibilities. We know for a fact that the development director should be spending at least 80% of their time doing development, having relations, building the personal relations with our major donors, and about 20% on administration. Now, you might think that I'm going to say that the executive director should spend 20% in development, 80% on administration, but it's actually just the opposite. We really want the executive director to be a main player in development. I would say at a minimum, the executive director should be spending at least 40%, if not 50% of their time doing development. Now, Right now, we're picking some executive directors up off the ground. They're saying, wait, I just brought someone on. You're asking me to spend 40 to 50% of my time.
They might already be spending 40 to 50% of their time on development. That's why they brought on a development director. But what we're asking them to do is remember the big picture of what development is. Development is made up of public relations, recruitment, and fundraising. So I'll bet the executive director might be surprised to know that so many of the functions that they're performing as an executive director are actually development related, not necessarily fundraising. So the public relations aspect, which is part of development, is a big role for the executive director. The executive director is going out, talking in churches. They're communicating with groups in small groups, other ministries. They're bringing the message out to individuals, out into the public. And so that component's already out there. Recruiting also tends to be a big part of the executive director's role. Recruiting new staff, volunteers, recruiting part-time staff, full-time staff. That's also part of the development area. So we tend to think that the development, once again, is fundraising. Fundraising is one component of that bigger picture. So it might be that the fundraising aspect is only about 20%, but there could be at least 20 or 30 or even 40% more of those other areas the executive director needs to continue to have. So it's really, really important that the executive director stay hand in hand. There really needs to be a partnership. In fact, it's one of the closest relationships in my mind with the development director, because the executive director is a vision caster. They're the ones that bring the ideas, come up with the ideas, and cast the vision out to others. The development director is the one who's entrusted with the role and responsibility of helping to fund those dreams. And so the executive director funnels the dreams out there, puts the dreams out, and the development director sets the people up to be prepared for the ask for that. Well, in business terms, it would be like the CEO and the COO. Right? The CEO is the one out there casting the vision, saying this is the direction we need to go, and and the COO is making it happen. Executing it.
That's right.
They work together. They're not, on two different islands. And in fact, if they are on two different islands, you've got yourself a monster because you got two heads.
They're actually, if they're working in solo, if they are out there isolated and in their own silos, they're never going to be able to get things done.
And that's true with a nonprofit. So we really want to see the executive director and the development director working hand in hand. They need to be almost like a marriage in a sense where they get each other. They understand each other's heartbeat. There has to be trust built.
Right.
It can't be, hey, I brought you on and you do your job and leave me alone.
Right.
You know, if that's the attitude that it's going to be, then it's not going to work.
No,
right?
it's not.
The development director is going to feel like, I need you to be doing some things for me. And the executive director is going to be like, hey, what are you asking me to do stuff for? What do you, you know, you do it.
Yeah. They need to be of one voice, of one mind, and be all on the same page.
Right. Steve Jobs was a great visionary for Apple, but I don't think he would have gotten it done if Tim Cook wasn't the chief operations officer for Apple, because he was the one that made it all happen. You know, Johnny Ive was his main designer. You know, so although Steve Jobs gets all the credit for everything, he had a great team of people around him. And he had the vision. But he had a great team around him of people that made it happen. And they were on the same team. And that's the part that's amazing is when you surround yourself with a great team of people who are working together and they get each other, they trust each other, and they're just moving forward to collectively together, that's where the magic happens. Bill Bright was the founder of Campus Crusade for Christ back in the 1950s. He started on his own with his own vision. But today, Campus Crusade for Christ is a worldwide organization. There's hundreds and hundreds of campus ministries all around the world. And it's a multi-million-dollar organization. There's
750 million.
And so how do you get from a one-man startup to a worldwide movement, you know, without a great team of people around you?
That's right. Bill Bright used to say, how do you need an elephant? One bite at a time. And that's what you've got to do, is you've got to incrementally move along the process to accomplish those goals and those tasks.
Okay. So I'm thinking about growing my nonprofit. I'm an executive director. I'm doing everything on my own. What should I'm looking to hire a development director. What kind of person am I looking to hire?
Well, first of all, and that's a great question, because I think what happens too often is that executive directors will hire someone who maybe has some development experience, but a lot of that development experience is either writing proposals or researching or taking their project managers, essentially. That first development director needs to be somebody who's out and about. And what I mean by that is that they need to be out in the community. They need to be mingling with people. They need to be representing the organization, and they need to be good at sales. And one of the recommendations I always make is that you look for a retired salesperson to move into your position, retired or someone who just came out of sales, because that person needs to be able to communicate. And you need a lot of seed capital. You need a lot of startup money to get you going and get you moving along. And that's going to take eyeball to eyeball, face-to-face meetings with people. It's not going to mean that we have somebody out researching what it takes to become a development person. And writing foundation proposals are fine, but it takes a long time. You can write letters and you can be a letter writer, but direct mail, once again, we've talked about in the past, direct mail response is about 2%. That is not going to keep your organization afloat. Yeah, exactly.
You always say it's direct mail followed up by a phone call.
Exactly. That's right. So if the person at least is people-oriented, they could at least get on the phone with people and talk with people. But ideally, you'd like someone who's getting out in the community and that you almost never see them at their desk, because so much of their time is sitting at other people's desks.
They love the ministry so much that they want to be out getting people fired up about it.
That's right.
That's actually a really good tip there, because when you're a small organization, you know, your first hire is going to be probably your development director, at least in the area of growing your organization. And it's really important that you get that right. You know, I've seen organizations who have hired development directors and they sit in an office and they research and they watch podcasts like ours, and they try
which is not bad in itself,
and they're trying to figure out a system, and they're trying to put together a flow, and they've got this big mastermind, but they are not getting on the phone. They're not talking to people. They don't want to talk to people. They're actually more introverted people, introverted people, and that's actually will hurt the organization. It will frustrate the executive director, and it will not result in new giving fast enough, right? Is what you're saying. Yeah. So getting that salesperson in there who is comfortable going in front of people. And I would say if you are going to have that new person, I guess I'm thinking if you're hiring a retired salesperson, that salesperson might be thinking, I don't know anything about development. They know how to sell a vehicle or sell real estate or they know how to close a deal, but they may not know anything about development. Right. So a great starting point for a person like that, I would say, number one, get them to go through our development basics course. That's going to lay the foundation for what is development and how does it work. Check out our Major Donor Mastery course because this course is very oriented towards how to meet with major donors, how to get face-to-face, what to say, how to do a presentation. And that's all the stuff that I think is going to bridge the gap very well from a retired salesperson to the kind of person that you're trying to think. Right. It's going to be very practical. They're going to watch that and they're going to say, okay, I know what I need to do. Right. Right. And just working with your critical few and getting that up, From there, I would say once they've gotten used to that face-to-face, stuff, maybe consider having them go through our Perfect Vision Dinner Mentorship Program, right? Because that's where you're going to learn the strategy for introducing new people, but starting with your current list, right? And just getting face-to-face with people, I think is a great place to start. Yeah. And really, there's no better place than to have the executive director go along with you. Yeah. There's a principle called the Rothschild principle, and it talks about transferring credibility and reputation from one person to the next. That principle needs to be applied here with a new hire of a development person. The executive director needs to transfer that credibility in those relationships over to the development director. You need to go alongside and say, Fred, I'd like you to meet Jim Dempsey. He's our new development director. I want you to really love on him like you've loved me. And I appreciate the fact that you've been such a faithful partner, and I want Jim to know what a faithful partner you've been. So that's really, really important to that organization. Jason, there's a statistic that really is scary with new development people. Okay. The life expectancy of a development person is 18 months. Wow. And it generally is because the expectations on that person are so high. And if you don't bring in the right person, that person will be gone pretty quickly. And so it's so important to make sure that you're bringing in the right person. Now, let me ask you this. I also want to share with you another statistic that it typically takes anywhere from 2 to 2.5 years to get a major donor program off the ground. What do those two numbers, those two amounts of time have in common? Number one, life expectancy, 18 months. The program starts to take off at 2 years. What happens is just before the program takes off, what happens? The executive director fires the development director, and just before that program is going to take off. So it's really important that a development director get funding coming in the door as quickly as possible. You mentioned the Perfect Vision Dinner strategy. Yeah. Great way to bridge the organization to get money coming in the door before that major donor effort takes off. Yeah. And even if it bought them another 6 months or 8 months, that was enough time for that major donor program to take off. And those two are synced together, and
the program takes off about the time when the development director is ready for it to take off.
Yeah.
So it's so important that those things work together. But focusing in on that major donor effort, as you said, is the most important thing they can be doing. You don't need to be bringing in someone who is a direct mail writer or direct mail expert. You need someone who's going face to face. Giving you the statistics one more time, a direct mail letter, 2% response. Follow that up with a phone call, jumps up to 25%.
Yeah.
Face-to-face appointment, 50% response rate.
Wow.
That and frankly, direct mail is extremely expensive.
Yeah.
Going face-to-face with someone costs you almost nothing unless you choose to buy them a meal to have that meeting. But your success rate is much greater and for less cost.
Yeah.
So that's really the way to go.
Well, that's really good. And that was totally not what I was thinking when I was starting this program, but I'm really glad that we had this conversation because it makes a lot of sense that the development director, at least the first one in a small organization, it makes a lot of sense that that person is a people person, that they're getting out, they're having that face-to-face interaction because that's where the lowest hanging fruit is, right? For every 1 to 2 people that you visit, you're more likely to get a gift than for every 1 to 2 letter you send out.
That's right.
Right. So it makes a lot more sense for someone to be a people person and getting out there.
Right.
And they're going to show their value a lot quicker. Right.
Yeah.
I know I've seen development directors where they come in, they're doing all this busy work, but it doesn't actually generate much income. And like you said, 18 months and they're gone.
Yeah. And really all they're being is just caretakers. And the problem is that the organization had to take out of their current money to pay that person's salary, and they aren't even paying for their salary. If your individual does not at least pay for their salary, they weren't worth it. And frankly, they need to pay for their salary probably twice, and that's exactly right, to make it valuable.
Yeah. Well, that's good. And if you're watching this and you're an executive director looking to hire a development director, let us know in the comments below. Yeah, that's me. Let us know what tips really spoke to your heart, and that would just greatly encourage us. You might be a development director looking to work for an organization, and maybe this helped you to just clarify what you should be doing as a development director when you get hired for an organization. So if that's you, let us know in the comments below. And let us know what spoke to you about it, because we'd love to meet you. We'd love to talk to you. Jim, any final last words as we wrap this up?
Well, I just have to say, if you're an executive director, make sure your motives are in the right place. Make sure that when you're bringing on a development director, they're coming on to be that complementary person and complementary relationship with, and not someone who's going to be expected to take over your responsibility so that you no longer have to do development. I'm sorry to say that you still need to be in development, because that's the expectation that our major donors especially have, is that they want to talk to the decision maker. They want to know that when they give a gift, that they're talking to the person who's going to determine where that money's used.
Does the president of Crew still do development?
Still does development, absolutely.
How many people does he call every week?
Well, he's got someone whose sole responsibility, most of their responsibility, is putting people. I'm putting them on the phone with them. They're calling on a regular basis. They put that out to all the development people, saying that Steve Sellers is going to be calling these individuals on these days. If you have any input for them, if you know any little tips or suggestions, something happened in their life that Steve needs to know about before he calls the person, let us know. And she gives him all the specifics on the gift that was given and how much was given recently, what happened in the last conversation, so he can bring back all those things. So it's neat to be able to see that.
Even
happen.
The president of a large worldwide organization is still doing development.
Absolutely, right.
So if that's true for him, it's definitely true for you as well. Well, if you like this episode, give us a subscribe or a thumbs up. Make sure you write a comment below. I would like to encourage you to subscribe to this channel, because we do regular podcast episodes for nonprofit leaders. And if that's you, you will definitely love future episodes that we have coming. So hit that subscribe button and let us know how we did in the comments below. And as always, we will see you again next time.
Take care.